Welcome to this explainer. Okay, I am absolutely thrilled to dive into this story with you today because it is, quite frankly, one of the most absurd historical comedies ever recorded. We're going to explore how a single, very unfortunate, dead farm animal nearly triggered a massive global war between two world superpowers. And the absolute craziest part of the whole thing, it all started over breakfast ingredients.
Seriously, ask yourself, how on earth does a dead farm animal almost trigger a global war? I mean, it sounds like the plot of a totally ridiculous movie, right? But as we'll see today, it was 100% real. We're going to see how a minor, completely mundane agricultural dispute over a tiny potato patch on San Juan Island snowballed completely out of control, ultimately leading to thousands of soldiers staring each other down, fingers literally on the triggers.
Section 1, a vague border treaty. Let's get right to the root cause here. The whole thing traces back to an incredibly vague agreement written way back in 1846. Basically, the treaty left the border description way too open to interpretation. The British were pointing to their maps saying the border goes through one specific channel, and the Americans were pointing to their maps claiming it goes through another. So who actually owns San Juan Island? Well, both sides firmly claimed they did. And for years, their foolproof plan to solve this incredibly tense international issue was to just move onto the island and completely ignore each other. Just pretend the other guys weren't even there.
Section 2, Pig Meets the Potato.
Fast forward to 1859. We've got an American farmer named Lyman Cutlar who has a garden full of potatoes, and a British guy named Charles Griffin who has a very hungry pig. And here is the totally mundane inciting incident that changed history. One afternoon, Griffin's pig just wanders right over into Lyman's garden. It starts aggressively eating, or as the historical record humorously notes, boinking, Lyman's precious potatoes. Lyman naturally loses it. He yells at the so-called British nerd to get out of his garden, grabs his musket, and shoots the pig dead right there on the spot. Now, in a sane world, this is just a minor civil matter, right? But the extreme comedic contrast between these two guys shows exactly why things went off the rails. On one hand, you have Lyman Cutlar offering what he thinks is a totally reasonable $7 to compensate for the dead animal. On the other hand, Charles Griffin is furiously spiteful and demands an outrageous $100. Griffin flat out threatens to have Lyman arrested if he doesn't cough up the cash. So instead of settling this like normal neighbors, the British threaten arrest, and Lyman panics and literally calls in the American military for backup. Section 3, Massive Military Escalation. So the Americans actually answer Lyman's call. They send in Captain George Pickett, and he definitely doesn't show up alone. He arrives with tremendous cheekbone energy and 66 heavily armed soldiers. He marches right onto the island, plants an American flag in the dirt, and essentially tells the British to sit down and shut up. Talk about escalating a petty grievance. Well, British Governor James Douglas was absolutely furious at this display. He decides to escalate this giant measuring contest to an absurd degree. I mean, what started with just 66 Americans quickly balloons. Soon enough, Pickett has 500 entrenched soldiers backing him up. Governor Douglas responds by sending in massive British warships armed with giant naval guns that could literally tear the island to shreds. Before you know it, you've got 5 warships and 2,000 British men staring down 500 entrenched Americans. It created this massive, incredibly tense standoff where eager soldiers on both sides were just waiting for someone to fire the first shot. All over a dead hog. Section 4. Cooler heads finally prevail. Okay, so this extremely tense situation desperately needed some level-headed adults in the room before a literal global conflict erupted. Enter our two heroes of reason. The U.S. sends General Winfield Scott, a seasoned veteran who, honestly, by this point in his life, was actually too portly to even mount a horse. The British send Rear Admiral Robert Baines, known as a highly pragmatic peacemaker. Both of these guys arrive on the scene, take one look at the massive infantries, the giant warships, and the dead pig that started the whole shebang, and they immediately realize how profoundly ridiculous the entire situation is. Get this. General Scott's eager soldiers were actually begging him for permission to shoot at the British. But Scott firmly shuts them down, delivering this incredibly blunt, hilarious reality check. He tells them, "I'm not starting a world war over a pork chop." And across the water, Admiral Baines was completely on the same page. He totally agreed with Scott, stating that involving two great nations in a war over a pig was, quote, total BS. He flatly refuses to engage his warships.
Instead, he steps up and successfully negotiates a harmonious relationship, agreeing to a joint military occupation of the island.
Section 5. The ultimate peaceful resolution. When you look at the full, bizarre timeline of this event, it's just wild. We go from that vague treaty in 1846 to a terrifying military standoff in 1859, but the next 12 years, that's honestly the best part. The British and American armies just lived on opposite ends of San Juan Island. They held parties together, they hung out, and they actually became really good chums. Ultimately, they decided to ask Kaiser Wilhelm I of Germany to act as an impartial judge to settle it once and for all. The Kaiser looks at the map, officially awards the island to the Americans, and everyone just packs up and goes home peacefully. Which brings us to the final tally. Despite the involvement of thousands of heavily armed troops, 5 massive naval warships, giant guns, and furious, spiteful politicians who were ready to tear each other apart, the absolute only casualty of the 1859 Pig War was the pig itself. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to reflect for a second. What modern pig wars might be escalating in your own life right now? I mean, how often do vague communication, petty grievances, and stubborn egos cause completely unnecessary conflicts for us today? Let this historical comedy be a fun little reminder to always keep things in perspective. And whatever you do, always remember to be the one who refuses to start a war over a pork chop. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.